The world order is shifting. New power centers are emerging, and old alliances are being reconfigured. At the heart of this change is the growing interaction between Europe and the BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This EuroBRICS equation isn't a formal alliance, but a dynamic web of economic and strategic interests. The BRICS represent major emerging economies, while the EU remains a global economic powerhouse. Their engagement is reshaping trade, diplomacy, and the global balance of power. In this new era, global influence is no longer defined by a single power, but by many. The economic relationship between Europe and the BRICS nations is the engine driving this global shift. It is a story of deep interdependence. For years, Europe's advanced industries have found eager consumers in the burgeoning middle classes of China and India. The Made in Germany label, for instance, has become a status symbol in Shanghai just as much as it is in Munich. This trade is not one-sided. Europe, in turn, has become heavily reliant on manufactured goods, raw materials, and increasingly technological components from BRICS countries. This intricate supply chain network has lowered costs for European consumers and fueled corporate profits, creating a powerful constituency that favors continued engagement. This interdependence, however, is now evolving into a more competitive dynamic. China, once the world's factory for low-cost goods, is rapidly moving up the value chain. It is now a direct competitor to European giants in sectors like electric vehicles, renewable energy technology, and telecommunications. This shift from partner to competitor is causing significant anxiety in Brussels and other European capitals. The EU's response has been a strategy of de-risking, not decoupling. This means trying to reduce critical dependencies on a single country like China without severing the economic ties that have become so vital. It is a difficult and delicate dance, attempting to maintain economic benefits while mitigating strategic vulnerabilities. The BRICS nations are also reshaping global investment flows. Sovereign wealth funds from the Gulf states, now part of the expanded BRICS, are acquiring significant stakes in European infrastructure, technology firms, and even sports clubs. Chinese companies continue to invest in key European assets, though they face increasing scrutiny from regulators. At the same time, European firms remain major investors in BRICS markets, building factories in India and Brazil to serve growing local demand. This two-way flow of capital creates a complex web of shared interests, making a clean break between the economic blocs nearly impossible and politically costly for all sides involved. The challenge for Europe is how to manage this complex economic dance. It must protect its industrial base and technological edge from state-subsidized competition, while avoiding a descent into protectionism that would harm its own export-oriented economies. This has led to a more assertive European trade policy, with investigations into unfair practices and the development of new industrial strategies. The economic relationship with BRICS is no longer just about trade and investment. It has become a central arena of geopolitical competition. How Europe navigates this challenge will determine its economic future and its role in the new global order, defining its prosperity for decades. The diplomatic landscape between Europe and the BRICS nations is a complex chessboard, defined by shifting alliances and divergent interests. While economic ties may pull them together, political values often push them apart. European nations, rooted in liberal democracy and human rights, frequently find themselves at odds with the more state-centric and authoritarian models prevalent in countries like China and Russia. This ideological divide creates a persistent tension that complicates cooperation on a range of global issues, from internet governance to international law. It is a fundamental difference in how they view the relationship between the state, the individual, and the international community. One of the most significant challenges is navigating the rivalry between the United States and China. European leaders are under constant pressure from Washington to adopt a tougher stance on Beijing. Yet, they are reluctant to be drawn into a zero-sum conflict that would force them to choose sides. Leaders like France's Emmanuel Macron have championed the idea of strategic autonomy, arguing that Europe must be able to act independently and pursue its own interests. This means cooperating with China on issues like climate change, while simultaneously pushing back against its assertive foreign policy and unfair trade practices. It is an attempt to carve out a middle path in an increasingly polarized world. The war in Ukraine has further complicated this diplomatic chessboard, exposing deep divisions. While European nations have united in their condemnation of Russia's aggression, the response from other BRICS members has been far more ambivalent. India and China have increased their trade with Russia, providing it with an economic lifeline. South Africa and Brazil have resisted taking sides, calling for a negotiated settlement. This divergence highlights a fundamental difference in perspective. For Europe, the conflict is an existential threat to its security architecture. For many in the global south, it is seen as a regional European conflict, and they are unwilling to sacrifice their own national interests for it. In this context, Europe's diplomatic strategy has become one of selective engagement. It is building a stronger strategic partnership with India, seeing it as a democratic counterweight to China in the Indo-Pacific. It is engaging with Brazil on environmental issues and with Gulf states on energy security. This is not about creating a single unified bloc, but about building a network of pragmatic relationships. Europe is learning to operate in a world where permanent alliances are less important than flexible, issue-based coalitions. This diplomatic maneuvering is a clear sign that the old Western-centric order is giving way to a more fluid and unpredictable geopolitical environment where every player must hedge their bets. The EuroBRICS equation is shaking the foundations of global energy markets and the dominance of the US dollar. With BRICS expanding to include major energy producers like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, the petrodollar system faces new challenges. These nations are now open to settling oil and gas trades in currencies like the Chinese yuan. Europe, seeking to diversify away from Russian gas, is turning to BRICS members, creating new dependencies. The BRICS alliance is pushing for de-dollarization and exploring common payment systems. While the dollar's dominance isn't over, its preeminence is now being contested. Europe must choose: strengthen the euro's global role, or risk being caught between shifting powers. The post-World War II global governance system, led by the UN, World Bank and IMF, is facing a crisis of legitimacy. BRICS nations are demanding more influence, arguing these institutions no longer reflect today's global power balance. In response, BRICS have created the new Development Bank as an alternative to the World Bank and IMF. Europe recognizes the need for reform, but fears losing influence. The future will likely be a hybrid model, with old and new institutions coexisting. The map of global governance is being redrawn, and Europe must decide where it stands. The era of uncontested Western dominance is ending. The rise of new power centers means the West can no longer set the global agenda alone. Instead of a new Cold War, the world is becoming genuinely multipolar, with influence shared among the US, China, EU, India, Russia, and others. In this complex landscape, diplomacy and economic statecraft matter more than ever. For Europe, the challenge is to adapt and act as a global mediator, building bridges between established and rising powers. The birth of a multipolar world is not a threat, but a new chapter to navigate with wisdom and foresight.